bit like Mario. The Transporter is a film that came out in the year 2002 starring Jason Statham, and I think the first role that I ever saw him in. Now, I can't exactly say that for certain because he's done a lot and a lot of his roles feel identical. He's kind of a typecast guy. But he had to start somewhere, and for me, that was the Transporter series, and I guess it was a good place to start because obviously they made 3 of these movies with Jason Statham. They made another movie, I'm not entirely sure if that's a prequel or a sequel or what have you, and then there's a TV series too. It ultimately stars Jason Statham as the Transporter, given the fact that one of his rules is no names. And as a transporter, he basically is somebody that does what he's told with no questions asked, as long as it's transporting something from point A to point B. Doesn't matter if it's a criminal activity, and it usually is. Heck, he's so hardcore about his rules that he'll turn down more money if the people he's working for decide to go against those rules. That way, as long as people follow the rules and do as he says, nothing bad can go wrong, everything can go according to plan, and it's smooth sailing. He'll never get caught, they'll never get caught, done. And I guess that's true, but believe it or not, the person who breaks his rules is himself. He breaks his own rules by looking at the package. He has to because it starts making noise while it's in his trunk, and it turns out it's this girl. For some odd reason, he is being paid to not ask questions and not look into a package, which turns out to be a girl being transported from point A to point B, and something doesn't really sit right with him, and ultimately he has to go against his own code to save this girl's life. And I mean, even by breaking the rules, things begin to barrel at him in ways that he didn't expect, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not prepared to deal with that as well. So, like I said, this is the very first thing that I think I ever saw Jason Statham, which means that at that point in my life, I didn't see this guy as a typecast actor. To me, he was unique, he was fun, he was cool, and in a weird way, it was almost like a substitute for James Bond. If you were hankering for a James Bond film, but you already saw them all. It was very much like that back in 2002. Since then, things have changed, obviously. A lot of movies have gone the same route. Fast and Furious is a prime example, another franchise that Jason Statham ends up being in, doing basically the same thing. Riding cars around, doing tricks in the cars, and making quirky comebacks, and fighting his kung fu like a boss. All things that he does in this film as well. And I would even argue that he probably does it better in the Fast and Furious saga as his character Shaw. But this is basically 20 years before that, so you kind of have to take that into consideration here. I grew up with this movie. I really love the franchise as a whole, at least the original trilogy. I haven't seen much more than that. And I love Jason Statham in this role. He's really in his prime. And that's kind of a weird thing to say because he seems to always be in his prime. 20 years later, he's still doing the same thing and doing it just as well. It's just, I don't know. Moving on. I just personally have to take a step back a little bit and realize that my love for this film is mostly found within the world of nostalgia. Because within the time span of the 2000s, between the years 2000 and 2010, there was a lot of movies that felt exactly like this. Like tech forward, like pro-technology, making movies that feel big and feel like they're taking place in a nearby future, right? Because technology was booming around this time. We were in a new millennium. Techno music was pretty big during this specific decade in film. And a lot of these movies feel very much like the same thing. But 20 years after the fact, now in 2024, looking back, it's hard to look at The Transporter and a lot of other action films that came out around the same time and not see a lot of ridiculous, over-the-top, corny, kooky stuff, because this movie's all over the place. Jason Statham's car is basically a James Bond car with a bunch of gadgets and tools and tricks that it can do. It's basically a character in the film itself, which I do like that, but the fact that the car almost seems to be made to sell toys because of all the cool stuff it can do is weird to me. I would almost go as far as to say that it actually limits or at least waters down the effectiveness of Jason Statham. We all know that Jason Statham can do a lot of stuff, and he can make a regular car look cool. Watch any of the Fast and Furious films starring Jason Statham, and you'll see that he can make a regular car look pretty darn cool. He does not need this super impressive espionage-like spy car, or whatever you call it. He doesn't need that. His character literally just needs to be able to know how to drive well. Obviously, when he gets out of the car, he knows how to fight with martial arts abilities. But unlike being in the car, he doesn't have some kind of super gadget clutch that he falls back on. Like, he doesn't shoot out pew pew things at people. No, he literally just fights them with his bare hands, showcasing the very fact that he doesn't need much to impress. He doesn't need a fancy car. I love the car. I grew up loving the stinking car and loving this movie, but it's a nostalgia thing. It's a campy 2000s thing. It was never anything that he needed to have. I think that is important to note. What's also important to note, and it kind of breaks my heart a little bit to admit, is that this writing in this film it's not all that great. It is very basic, which technically you do kind of expect to find with action-heavy films in this decade. You don't want to focus too much on the story because you want to focus a lot more on the action and how the action looks. And obviously you want to make Jason Statham look good while he's performing those stunts. And he does. The way the film is shot is one of my favorites, especially in the 2000s decade, that showcased action really well. The choreography's on point. The cameraman was not too close or too far away, and the editor was not making things too choppy for an audience to start getting aggravated with. It was very smooth and very engaging. Back in 2002, it didn't really matter that the writing in this film was kind of whatever. It was because majority of the audience was a bunch of average basic males looking to see some action and looking to see a pretty girl maybe, and that was basically it. 20 years after the fact, in 2024, I do actually expect the film to be a little bit more well-rounded in order to be more memorable as a whole, because I don't actually think the movie is as memorable as I remember it being. It's good, it's great actually, if you just want to pass the time. Past that though, I can't really say much about the movie. But as human beings, sometimes what we want to do is learn and grow and honestly think about a movie after watching it, discuss it with people after watching it, and there's not really much in this movie for that. Great camera set pieces, great camera work during those moments, a lot of fun quippy moments from Jason Statham, as you kind of expect at this point in his career. But the story is indeed lacking, which is, as I've said about 10 different times during this review, is par the course of an action film in the 2000s trying to jump on the "we live in the future now" train. So to be completely fair and honest and unbiased as humanly possible, I'd have to give this a rating of no more than B+. Back in the day when I originally watched it, I probably would have given it an A. Maybe not A+, but I would have gotten it up there. But it has sunk a little bit for me because I do want more out of an experience while watching a film. Now, don't get me wrong, nostalgia plays a huge part in being able to watch something like this time and time again. But if it came out in 2024, I'm not sure if it would be up to snuff or they would have had to add a little bit extra in order for you to care more about who these people are and why they are that way. Heck, you know nothing about this character that Jason Statham's playing. I mean, you don't need to. Part of his roles are no names, right? But that's for the other characters. That's for the people that he's working for. It's not necessarily for the audience. The audience can know everything about this guy and why he has these rules in place, right? But ultimately, B+. I think that's more than fair when it comes down to a film like this. I think that realistically it could be scored more so like B- than anything else, but I do know that it has a little bit of a cult following, and that's the main reason why I'm keeping the grade a little bit higher than I normally would. But what about you guys, though? Have you seen the Transporter series? Is this your favorite when it comes down to Jason Statham? Why or why not? Let me know what your favorite Jason Statham movie is as a whole. Also, as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review, whatever that may be. But until then, peace out.